no intro, just straight into it. Okay, this week we are going to do the video that I really wanted to do, which is we are going to talk about the enormous changes that we have seen in politics in the last 6 months since I stopped doing videos. And we are going to zoom in on this one specific election in a suburb of Manchester, northwest England, which happened about a month, 6 weeks ago, because I think it's a fascinating story, which is really interesting, a bit infuriating and a bit funny. But we're going to look at that and we're going to discuss what this situation shows us, just by looking at the massive changes in UK politics, what it shows us about the enormous changes that, and I mean really enormous changes that have been happening, are still happening, and will continue to happen in global politics, in every country in the world. So we're going to try to understand these enormous changes in British politics, global politics, and then at the end, we're going to talk about what that means specifically for you, what that means specifically for me, what that means specifically on us at this channel, and basically how we are going to react and how you are going to react and take advantage of these enormous changes that are happening in politics here in the UK and around the world. Okay, so we will get to the Gorton and Denton by-election, which is the small election that happened in Manchester a month, 6 weeks ago. But first, I want to take you back 6 months to the 21st of September last year, when I put out a video called "Will Reform Win the Next UK Election?" And when I made that video, like the good financial markets trader that I am, the first thing I did was I looked at the betting market odds for who will win the next UK general election. I looked at the odds for who will come first, who will get the most seats. And I'm going to flash up now on the screen the odds as they were when I shot that video in September last year. We'll flash them up. Those numbers probably mean nothing to you, so I will convert those betting odds into a table of probabilities, which shows you who bettors, gamblers, thought was most likely to come first in the next general election in September last year. What you can see when you look at those odds is that in September of last year, so just over 6 months ago, the next general election was widely considered to be a two-horse race between Reform and Labour, with Reform significantly ahead. Reform were considered to have almost exactly 50% chance of winning. Labour had basically a 1 in 3 chance of winning, and the rest of the chances was, you know, a bit for the Conservatives, a tiny bit for the Liberal Democrats. And this is normal. So in the UK, we have what is called a first past the post voting system. I'll probably do a video about it in detail at some point, but all you need to know is basically this voting system is pretty much designed to guarantee that you will end up with a two-party political system. It's very, very difficult to have a political system with more than 2 parties under first past the post. So first past the post is like the British voting system, and it still exists in most countries which are former British Empire. So we have it in the US, we have it in Australia, we don't have it in New Zealand anymore. And this political system is designed to deliver two-party politics, which is why the UK has basically always been a two-party system. It is why the US is very aggressively a two-party system. So back then, in September last year, we had exactly what you would expect, which was a two-party system delivering basically 2 parties. The next election was split between Reform and Labour. And then once I had these odds in that video, I went on to do, again, what any other good trader would do, which was say, okay, what do I know that the market doesn't know? What predictions can I make using my specialist knowledge, my private knowledge? That means I can predict better than the gamblers, and can I then correctly predict how these odds will change? And if you go back and watch that video, you'll see I then went on to make a series of predictions about how the betting market would change, about how the odds would change. So the main prediction that I made in that video was very simple. So anyone who's watched this channel for a long time will know that this channel is built around a pretty simple basic thesis, which is growing wealth inequality hurts the economy and hurts living standards. And this is not generally understood by economists or traders. Inequality of wealth is increasing, which means that living standards will keep falling. And because this is not generally understood by economists or traders, this will tend not to be predicted correctly in advance. This helps us to predict financial markets and the economy, and I've made a lot of money using this to bet on financial markets, but it also helps us to predict politics. And the way that it affects politics is really quite simple. Living standards will continue to fall, and that means that in basically every country in the world, incumbents will tend to become more and more unpopular over time. So incumbent is the guy in charge at the moment. And what we have seen over the last really 15, 20 years, especially the last 5, 10 years, is politicians who are in power tend to lose popularity very quickly because inequality gets worse, the economy gets worse, nobody does anything about it, and obviously the public starts to get angry. Why are you not doing anything? Why are living standards getting worse? And politicians who are in power tend to become very unpopular very quickly. So I applied this basic understanding to the financial market, the betting market around the next election, and I made the very simple prediction, which is Labour will start to become more unpopular over time, and the likelihood of Labour winning the next election will fall over time. So let's have a look at how my main prediction, my first prediction, has fared in the last 6-7 months. Okay, so if we flash it up, you will see that in the last 6 months, Labour's probability of winning the next election, according to the betting market, has fallen from 32.5% to 26%. So my prediction was right. That is quite a big fall. If Labour continued to fall by 6.5% every 6 months until the next election, by the time we get to next election, their chance of winning will be minus 13%. So it is a pretty big fall. So I think that's thumbs up for the prediction, although obviously it's coming from, I think that's caused by basically what I said. Living standards have continued to fall. Labour are continuing to fail on the economy. They continue to be perceived to be failing on the economy. I think they are failing on the economy, and that's hurting their popularity. The second prediction that I made was, again, a very simple one, and it was basically like a consequential prediction, which is I was confident that Labour's popularity would fall, Labour's chance of winning would fall. As I've explained, the UK, just like the US political system, is designed to be a two-horse race. It is designed to be a two-party political system. So the obvious logical consequence in a two-horse race, and in September last year, it definitely was a two-horse race. If Labour's popularity is going to fall, Labour's chance of winning is going to fall. The other horse in the race, which was Reform, their chance of winning should increase. And the title of that video was, Will Reform win the next election? And I basically used this logic to say, well, because we know Labour will fail, Reform will probably win, to predict that Reform probably would win the next election. So what has happened to Reform's probability of winning the next election? Based on the latest odds, Reform's chance of winning the next election has changed from 50% to, at the moment of speaking, 38.5%, which is a really pretty enormous drop. If they continue to fall 11.5% every 6 months, then they would end up at minus 12%. Or it would be worse, isn't it? It would be more than that. They would end up at 11.5% every 6 months, 25% a year, end up minus 37% by the end of the next election. So if Reforms continue to lose 11.5% chance of winning every 6 months, they would be down way into negative territory by the time of the next election. And this is, I'm going to stop at this point and say, this is amazing, and it is also borderline impossible, because, as I've said a number of times already on this video, the UK electoral system, like the US electoral system, is designed to deliver two-party politics. And if one party massively hurts their popularity, the other party should increase their chance of winning, basically by default. And yet what we have seen in the last 6-7 months is, in a system designed to deliver two-party politics, massive falls in the likelihood of winning of both of the horses in the two-horse race. A massive decrease in the chance of Reform winning and a massive decrease in the chance of Labour winning. And this is amazing. This is like impossible. And let's talk a little bit about how this impossible thing has managed to happen. Okay, so I think first we need to explain how and why it is that Reform's chance of winning the next election has significantly decreased, even in the context of pretty aggressively decreasing popularity of their main rivals, the Labour Party. And I think a lot of people will say that this is because of Donald Trump, and I think this is definitely part of it. I think it probably is not going too far to say that Donald Trump in the last 6 months has done a string of things which, especially viewed from the perspective of somebody who is not American, but even increasingly from the perspective of somebody who is American, have seemed increasingly wild and reckless and perhaps non-strategic, are obviously having the consequences of decreasing living standards. I did a video last year, it might even be 2 years ago now, called Why Labour and Trump Will Both Fail. And it was basically saying, you know, we have a new Labour government and a new Trump government, one of whom is supposed to be on like the left of politics, one of whom is supposed to be on the right of politics. But in both cases, they're not taking action on inequality. And in both cases, we will see living standards fall. And I think it is becoming increasingly obvious that I was right on that we have both politicians on the left and the right presiding over falling living standards. I think people who are able to look at Donald Trump and to see that these new far-right politicians, at least in the case of Trump, and I think more broadly, are not delivering improved living standards. In fact, are delivering like quite aggressively worsening living standards. Obviously hurts parties like Reform and people like Nigel Farage and far-right politicians all over the world. But the truth is that is part of it. The biggest reason that Reform's chances of winning have significantly fallen is quite simply because there has been a split in the Reform Party. So now, when I made these predictions saying that Reform's odds would go up, I'll protect myself a little bit. You can go and watch the video. I caveated it quite clearly, which is I said that I think that there are a lot of people in Reform who are a little bit crazy, perhaps. And I said there was always a risk with Reform growing that they would do something crazy. And I think my exact words were, as long as Reform don't do anything crazy, then their odds of winning will go up. But what Reform have done is they have basically, to some degree, split the party. There is a guy called Rupert Lowe, who was a Reform MP, who has basically split off and started his own political party called Restore Britain, which is also on the right or the far right of politics. Under the British political system, the first past the post system, splitting of the vote is aggressively punished in that system. So the splitting of the right or the far right vote into two separate political parties massively damages Reform's chance of winning, according to the betting market. I was quite surprised because I haven't really heard much about this new far-right party, Restore Britain, but the betting market thinks it's going to get a big chunk of votes and that's going to hurt Reform. So, yeah, Reform have been hurt by splitting of their vote and basically the extreme unpopularity of Trump, especially outside of the country. I think the biggest question this raises is when I brought up the fall in Labour's chance of winning from 32.5% to 26%, when I brought that up earlier on in this video, that was without the context of this massive fall in Reform's chance of winning. When we add in the context that their main political rivals have like massively shot themselves in the foot, the fact that Labour's chance of winning has still fallen, and quite a lot, really what this says is Labour's performance in the last 6 months is really, quite frankly, like catastrophically bad. Like to exist in a political system which is aggressively designed to give only two parties, to see your chance of winning significantly fall, despite the fact that your main strategic rivals have massively damaged themselves, is a really woefully, catastrophically bad performance. And of course, the next question we have to ask here, which is to address the impossibility, how is it even possible if the two horses running the two-horse race are looking significantly less likely to win the two-horse race, and if you add these up, you'll see that the chance of winning is only about 60% between these two parties. Who is going to win the next election? Where has those probability points, those percentage points of chance of winning, where have they gone? And if we bring this chart up, I'll show you that it's not gone to the Conservatives, who have only very slightly increased their chance of winning from 11% to 12.5%. It's not gone to the Liberal Democrats, who are still sitting at pretty much exactly 2%, very unlikely chance of winning. If we want to see who are the guys who have entered this race and made it much more open, we need to add basically 2 more rows to this table. And we need to add Restore, who's this new party, who are basically a sort of part of Reform, like a new separate wing of Reform, who have apparently 7.5% chance of winning the next election, which is insane because most people in the country have never even heard of them. And we have to add the Greens, who are, according to the betting market, as of today, as of this morning, have an 11.5% chance of winning the next election, which is insane. The Greens have never had won more than 4 seats in a general election. Restore didn't even exist until about 2 months ago. Until 2 years ago, the Greens had never won more than 1 seat in a general election. And I just want you to take a little moment to look at this graph, this table here, which shows you the 6 parties, I mean the Liberal Democrats are in there with 2%, who all have apparently a chance of winning this next election. And the fact that we sit here looking at that, we have no idea who is going to win the next election. And I just want to make it clear, this has never, ever happened before in the whole history of British democracy. The UK political system is designed to be a 2-horse race, and currently what you have is basically a completely shattered vote, completely shattered polling, and a betting market that thinks any of 5 parties, one of which didn't even exist 2 months ago, could win the next election and has no idea who is going to win. And I just want to sit with this for a moment to really emphasize just how historic this is, all right? So the Conservatives, who are sitting there sort of joint third, fourth in likelihood to win, have come first or second in every single election in the entire history of British democracy, which is over 200 years, right? The British political system has been a 2-horse race forever. It was a 2-horse race between the Conservatives and the Liberals for 120 years. And Labour have come first or second in every single election since, I think, 1918. This is the whole design of this political system is to be a 2-horse race, and it is now a 5-horse race, and that is not even considering the nationalists in Scotland and Wales, who will almost certainly win Scotland and win Wales in the next election. What you are seeing is the shattering of 230, 40, 50 years of British democratic history and really of global democratic history. What you are seeing is the end of history, right? So there was an American political philosopher called Francis Fukuyama who wrote this book in 1992 called The End of History. And the idea was USSR has fallen, Berlin Wall's fallen, communism failed, communism's over, and now history's finished. We've discovered the optimal way of managing politics, the optimal way of managing economics, and we're not going to have any more big crises anymore because basically the big questions are solved. And here we are now, 30 years later, with what looks like the death of 250 years of electoral history. And what the big point I want to make here is this is not at all unique to the UK. Wherever you're watching from, unless you're watching from America, I know we do have a lot of American viewers, this is happening in your country as well. So I did some research, even got some statistics, would you believe? So this situation that we had in the UK until recently of one big centre-left party and one big centre-right party, and it's basically two-party politics between them, was like roughly normal in the Western world. It was roughly normal in Europe, obviously in the US, Australia, New Zealand, all these places. This was basically the way that politics has been done since World War II in most countries. And I looked into this phenomenon of splintering of the vote, collapsing popularity of these like historical parties that have dominated politics across the world, and like collapse in this two-party system. And I looked at the percentage of seats which went to the main two parties across a variety of different countries. Here's just a few statistics, right? In Spain in 2008, the top two parties took 84% of seats. And in 2019, it was 45%. In France, it fell in 12 years recently from 82% to 59%. In Italy in 2006, the top two coalitions took 99.5% of seats, and now that's down to minus 70%. Germany's fallen from 77% to 49%, Netherlands 56% to 34%. What you are seeing here in the UK in the last 6 months is a representation of the end, the absolute collapse of the political centre that has dominated ideas about economics, about politics, about the way to run countries in the West, in Europe, for 80, 90 years, and it's just so. And the reason we're only seeing this in the UK now is because these things have happened already in Europe. It took longer to reach the UK because we have these political structures which make it very easy for the established political parties to stay in power. And we're only starting to see it crack now because it's so difficult to displace those central parties. But if you look at Europe, what we can see very, very clearly is an absolute collapse in political popularity, in voting for these centrist political parties, be they centre-left or centre-right. Quite simply, I think quite obviously, because people have lost and are losing faith in these traditional political parties to deliver anything other than consistently falling living standards. Okay, so that's the first big point I want to make, right? That the political game, the political world here in the UK has changed in this way that has never happened before in more than 200 years of British democracy. The complete collapse of the centre, the absolute splintering of the vote. And that is not at all uniquely British. That is happening all over the world. The only reason it's not happening in America is because America, the design of the political system there makes it incredibly hard, almost impossible to displace the mainstream existing political parties. But yeah, the popularity of the traditional centrist political parties collapsing all over the world. It's only surviving in the US, where it is basically impossible to displace them. And what should be the message of this? So here, in the context of the UK, I think it should be incredibly obvious what this means is, and this is not just in the UK, anywhere across the world, anywhere across Europe, if you are a political centrist, if you are a supporter of the Labour Party, or you're a member, or you're a politician in the Labour Party, but not just the Labour Party, the centre-left party or the centre-right party in Germany or France or Spain or the Netherlands, or if you're the Democrats in America or in Australia or in Japan, if you are a supporter of these mainstream political parties, the world is obviously showing you that unless you shift to a position where you say, we accept that the status quo, the existing way of doing things, is not succeeding in preventing living standards from falling, you will disappear. And that is, if you are the Labour Party now, and you can see the absolute disappearance of the historical, traditional centre-left political parties in every single one of your surrounding countries, and you do not realise that unless you change, you too will disappear, then you are basically completely insane. This has been happening for 15 years now in every single country in the world, until and unless you are willing to shift to a position that accepts we need to do something significantly differently. It is obvious that you will disappear. And what that means is you need to be serious about why the public is unhappy on the economy, and you need to start seriously considering the proposals that are on the table for doing something significantly differently on the economy. And maybe, just fucking maybe, you need to pick up the phone and give me a call. And I am going to flash an email address up on the screen here, and we'll put it down in the description. If you are a Labour politician, send us an email, right? The public want change. We're out here getting 1 million fucking views a video, right? We get more views than fucking Question Time. Who is taking the votes that used to go to you? It is somebody who takes their entire economic playbook from this fucking channel. Give us a call and don't fucking die. And on this subject, the subject of who does speak to me and who doesn't, we get to the issue, and I'm really glad to get to this because this is such an incredible story. We get to the issue of the Gorton and Denton by-election. So I know nowadays we get a lot of views from people who are not from the UK, so just briefly explain. Gorton and Denton is a suburb of Manchester, which is the UK's second or third biggest city. It's in the northwest of England. In our system, if an MP stands down for whatever reason, they have an election in that area to decide who the new MP is. So a bit of context, all right? We have a Labour government in this country. We've had a Labour government for coming up to 2 years now, and that government is incredibly unpopular. The leader, Keir Starmer, who is the current Prime Minister, is incredibly unpopular. He is apparently the least popular Prime Minister in the history of British polling, which is obviously quite extreme. Reform, the new right or far-right party, have been consistently polling in first place. But Labour are in government, they have a big majority. There will not be an election, very, very likely there won't be one for 3 years. So we have this strange situation where the party that is in power is incredibly unpopular. They have 3 years of government. The way things are going, they look like they're going to lose. I think unless they change course, I think they will lose quite badly, unless Reform like really, really massively pick it up. And obviously, Labour are looking at the polling, which is really, really bad. They should be looking at the betting odds, which is also really bad. And they need to think about how can we not lose the next election. Now, I've been saying it for a long time, but it's becoming increasingly almost certain that Labour will change their leader before the next election. I don't want to say it really, but Keir Starmer is kind of like a dead man walking. Everybody you speak to sort of knows he's going to be changed. So there's the discussion now in the Labour Party of like, who do we replace Keir Starmer with? How do we not win the next election in the context of Labour being incredibly unpopular? And the question obviously is like, who do we have who's popular? And the obvious answer to that question in this country is a guy called Andy Burnham. So Andy Burnham, you may or may not know, is the mayor of Manchester. And He's quite popular in Manchester. I would say, and I'm pretty sure polling would agree, that Andy Burnham is probably quite easily the most popular Labour politician in this country at this moment, which means that he is kind of obviously the most likely guy to be able to save this very unpopular Labour Party from losing the next election very badly. But the problem is, he's not an MP. He's the Mayor of Manchester, which means that he is not eligible to be Prime Minister and he's not eligible to be the leader of the Labour Party. So, one of the MPs in Manchester, which is where Andy Burnham is Mayor, which is where Andy Burnham is from, stood down basically with the idea that we can get Andy Burnham to become an MP. And if Andy Burnham becomes an MP, then he can become Prime Minister, and maybe we, the Labour Party, can not lose the next election. Maybe we can win the next election. Maybe we can prevent a reform government. Maybe we can prevent a far-right government. It was a pretty sensible move. I think everybody agreed. But Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, to be fair, as you can probably imagine, wasn't very happy about preparations being made to basically oust him, kick him out as Prime Minister. And I don't know the details, but it looks very much like him and the team around him used their power, used their influence to block Andy Burnham from being able to become a candidate in this election, which meant that he wasn't eligible to stand. This is the first thing which I was kind of amazed at this point, because we're not politically factional here. This is a channel which is about wealth inequality and is about wealth taxes and is about the economy. And everyone who watches this channel will know I'm a big campaigner for wealth taxes. I think we have almost zero chance of getting anything on inequality. I think Reform, if they win, will significantly cut taxes on the rich, which I think will be incredibly bad for living standards. So I don't want Reform to win the next election. And in the moment that the Labour Party blocked Andy Burnham, I've got to be honest, I had my head in my hands here, because I still think, to this day, Labour's best chance of not getting smashed in the next election is to make Andy Burnham Prime Minister. And I'm not like Team Burnham or anything, I'm just looking at it as a trader. This guy was their best chance of not losing the next election, and he was blocked by like the most unpopular man like in the history of British politics. And it just makes me wonder, where are the Labour MPs on this? You're going to lose your job, right? You're going to lose your job and you're going to lose the country to a far-right political party, who, do you not care about that? I don't know how power works. Clearly, I don't understand how power works within the Labour Party. But it just made me wonder, like, is this like a dictatorship of Keir Starmer? Do you want to win the next election? I don't understand how the Labour Party was not able to prevent Keir Starmer and his team from blocking Andy Burnham. That was obviously your best chance to not lose the next election. Okay, but we move on from that. Okay, so Keir Starmer blocks Andy Burnham. And I was in Australia when all this was happening. And as soon as Keir Starmer blocked Andy Burnham, I'll be totally honest, I messaged Jack Polanski and I said, and also I'm watching the betting odds. So the moment they blocked Andy Burnham, the Greens were favourite to win that election. And it's for the obvious reason that, Keir Starmer is incredibly unpopular. Andy Burnham is from Manchester. He's incredibly popular. People like to use these by-elections as a protest vote. As soon as they blocked Andy Burnham, the betting market, so it's not just me, the betting market thought that the Greens were going to win that election. But it's not the end of the world for Labour. These by-elections, in the big scheme of things, are not politically important. It's only one MP. So, you lose one MP, Labour have a big majority, it's not a big deal, you accept losing one MP. But the other context we have, and I didn't mention this in the video from 6 months ago, is, so the Greens have this new leader, Jack Polanski, and he came in from the start and he was wealth taxes, wealth taxes, wealth taxes. He was very aggressive on social media in the terms of focusing on social media, doing a ton of interviews. And I think it was like obviously the right strategy. I mean, and of course I would say that because Zach Polanski's strategy, since he's become leader of the Greens, obviously he has a bigger job than mine, but it's basically exactly the strategy of this channel, right? Which is to focus on the economy, to focus on living standards, to focus on wealth taxes, which are hugely popular with the public, and to focus on social media, which is obviously where political power is moving, right? So, Zach Polanski contacted me before he became, and he said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, I didn't know who he was, nobody knew who he was, I'm going to take this wealth tax stuff, and I'm going to run with it, and I said, good luck to him, and you get this immediate huge surge, right? This huge surge in popularity, huge surge in polling for the Greens, which happened in the back end of last year. People debate about why. I think it's basically because of really, quite simply, the move towards wealth taxes and a focus on economy, and a move towards aggressive focus on social media. And it has to be said, Zach Polanski has worked incredibly hard, has done just an unbelievable number of interviews. It's insane how many interviews he's done. So then as soon as Labour block Andy Burnham, Labour are incredibly unpopular. In that moment, you have your first political test for the Green Party. Can you actually win an election? But the betting market always thought that the Greens were going to win. I follow the betting market very, very closely, as I probably made obvious. And I'll be clear. I've been saying, I went on Zach Polanski's podcast. I told him very, very clearly, my plan has been for some time. All we do is we make wealth taxes popular. We make wealth taxes incredibly popular. I've called it the Rupert Murdoch strategy, which is I'm not a politician. I'm not trying to be a politician. I'm doing what Rupert Murdoch does. So for those of you who don't know, Rupert Murdoch is probably the world's biggest media giant. He owns a ton of newspapers. He owns Sky News. He owns a lot of news channels, not just in this country, but across the world, UK, US, Australia. And he is incredibly politically powerful. And any smart politician tries to get on his good side because by controlling newspapers and news stations, he controls to some degree what the public believe on issues about politics and economics. And he doesn't need to be a political party because if he tells the public that Labour are shit or the Conservatives are shit, that is going to swing a lot of votes. So my plan has been, very, very simply, educate the public. The primary thing, the main thing that matters on improving your living standards for your family over time is wealth inequality and wealth taxes. And we educate the public again and again and again and again and again and again. And the strategy is we educate the public, we shift the public opinion, and then the politicians are supposed to recognize the shift in public opinion and recognize that if they don't shift towards public opinion, they will get smashed. And the plan was always, from the very start, not for the Greens, not for Zach Polanski, although I'm very glad that they've picked it up, it was for Labour. Because we live in a two-party system, and that two-party system was supposed to be Labour. And what I want is to change the laws, so I need to influence the party. So you move the public. You create this space for Labour to walk into, and they don't walk into it. The Greens walk into it. And my plan then was like, well, that's fine, because the Greens will become very quickly very popular, and then Labour will be forced to move. And Labour didn't move. Labour didn't move, and so then when this election came up, I was quite pleased because I was like, well, the Greens will win. The Greens will win, and then it will force Labour to move. So I messaged Zach Polanski and I said, listen, as soon as they dropped Andy Burnham out, I said, listen, you better win that election because it's yours to win, right? And the betting market always thought that they were going to win it. Would you believe it gets worse after this? And the Greens were, as soon as Burnham got blocked, the Greens were always betting market favourites for that election, which is not surprising because Labour are very unpopular. And that's how it was. And I was out there in Australia just thinking, the Greens are going to win, and the Greens were favourites, and then a big chunk behind them was Reform, and then Labour were a little bit behind. That was always the betting market odds. And then the Labour, I don't understand this. This is the most confusing thing that happened, and it's it's horrible and it's ridiculous and it's funny and I don't understand what happened. Labour ran this massive article in The Guardian saying, we have the data. They ran this article in The Guardian saying, we have the data. We're on the ground collecting the data. We know what's happening. And what we know, I've got a quote here. That data tells us something important. However crowded the ballot paper may look, the decision facing voters in This is from The Guardian. The decision facing voters in Labour speaking in The Guardian. The decision facing voters in Gorton and Denton is not fragmented across multiple parties. It is a two-horse race between a Labour Party rooted in Manchester's values and a reform campaign built on grievance and division. So, Labour got smashed in this election. Okay, they came third. The Greens won by a mile, right? And this is a few days before, just a few days before the vote, Labour have come out and said, we've got all the data. We've got all the data and we know, with certainty, this is a two-horse race between us and Reform. And then these two parties come a distant second and third, with Labour in third, to the Greens. So, when Labour said that they have the data and they know, that it is a two-horse race between Labour and Reform, either they are lying or they are completely wrong. Well, one of these two things has to be true. And if they were lying, that is the less embarrassing outcome here. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so as I've already showed you the odds for the next election, right? And the Labour and Reform are still the two favourites for the next election, as I've shown you earlier on. And Labour, unless they move on the economy and wealth taxes, which unfortunately it looks like they still won't, the economy will get worse and their popularity will fall. Now, let's talk a little bit about political two-horse races in which one of the parties is the right or the far right party. So Reform are the new far right party in the UK. I know some people don't like when I use that term, but we have to understand, in an international context, every single country has seen a loss of support in the centre-right party, which in this country is the Conservatives, in the US is the Republicans. The centre-right party has become unpopular and has been replaced by a further right party that is, insurgent. And in the vast majority of countries, including the UK, that far-right party is growing in popularity, but is still unpopular with the majority of the public. So the best example of this is to look at the French political system. So in the French presidential election, there are 2 rounds of voting. And in the first round, we figure out who's first and second, and then we have a head-to-head between first and second. And the way that has been going for a number of years now in France is pretty much always first and second in the first round is the far-right leader and some boring political centrist. Now, as I've explained at the beginning of this video, political centrism is becoming less and less popular around the world, but whilst the far right is growing in popularity, it remains unpopular with the majority of the public. And at the moment, it is still true in most countries that if you can boil the political race down to a far right or a boring centrist, in most cases, at least France has shown for some time, the boring centrist will usually win. Obviously, that is challenged by the last US election. So I think as the far right grows, this is no longer increasingly true. But it is true that if you can simplify an election down as a boring centrist to, yes, we know we're a boring centrist and we're unpopular, but at least we're not the far right, that is a relatively popular and relatively successful electoral strategy. It worked for Biden, it's worked in France for a number of years. And this is the reason why Labour chose to frame this by-election in this way. They know that if they can say, yes, we know we're unpopular, but we're not the far right, they know that that is a relatively successful political strategy. And that's why they chose to frame the Gorton and Denton by-election in this way. The reason that I am like head in hands about why they chose to do this at the by-election is that by-election is one seat. It doesn't really change the world, okay? In the next general election, the only good political strategy that Labour are going to have is to say that this election is a two-horse race between us and the far right. If they use that in the next election, they could possibly win. That is their best strategy. It is their best strategy. Now, going into the Gorton and Denton by-election, the Greens were always clear favourites in the betting market for that by-election. But the general election was still looking like a two-horse race between Labour and Reform. So you go into the election, the by-election, and the situation is, yes, we know we're probably going to lose this by-election, which is one seat. But in the next general election, which matters, it is still true that it is most likely a two-horse race between us and Reform. And then you go out in the by-election and you say, when it is always incredibly likely to be immediately proven to be a lie, that this is a two-horse race between us and Reform. And then that is immediately proved to be a lie 2 days later. And then in the next election, your best plan that you have, when you know it's your best plan, is going to say that this general election is a two-horse race between us and Reform. And now, even though it was true, and perhaps still will be true, nobody is going to believe you. I just don't understand. It's like you're about to play the World Cup final and you intentionally injure your star forward. Like the day, what are you doing? What? I don't understand this. There is no political situation in which it makes sense to absolutely your only good strategy for the general election in a one-seat by-election. It's a bit... I had this friend in high school. He'll be watching this probably. Smart kid. But whenever there was an exam, his instinct was always, how can I cheat in this exam? And he invented all of these unbelievably innovative ways to cheat in his exams, which if he would have used that energy to study, he might have passed the exams anyway. But it's this kind of mentality, like, as soon as you block Burnham, you're likely to lose that election. Just own it. Just say, listen, we know we're unpopular right now. You know, we know that people are not happy with what we're doing. We're going to work on that. We're going to fix it. You know, if people want to vote against us, they can vote against us. But we are going to prove our electoral strategy is going to work. And we're going to prove our economic strategy is going to work. And you accept the loss, accept that you can lose one election. But instead, you instinctively lie in a way that massively damages your chances of winning the next election. And then, after this, I was watching these odds, right? So we spoke at the beginning of the video of how is it possible for Labour's odds to collapse despite Reform's odds also collapsing. It happened exactly on the by-election. Exactly on the by-election. And I just cannot understand. I cannot, and it's very frustrating, right? Because, you know what, I'm very strategic here on this channel, right? And my plan was always, I'm not going to try to lobby Labour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the public and I'm going to put Labour in such a position that the obvious best move, the way for them to win the next election, the way for them to not lose the next election is to call me up and to move on wealth taxes and to give us something on wealth taxes, right? And that was, in my opinion, their obvious correct move 1 year ago, right? And they didn't take it. Somebody else comes in and takes it and is beating them in the polls, right? On the idea which I invented for Labour, right? And they don't take it. And it's, people talk to me and say that the problem is that Labour are corrupt or that they're not nice guys. Like, but I don't play the game assuming I'm playing with nice guys, right? But I do assume that I'm playing with like mildly intelligent, strategic people. Listen, if these guys called me up a year ago, I think there's a very good chance, which Zach did, then I think there's a very good chance there's no green surge, you just give us something. I'm not asking you to give us wealth taxes now. Listen, just call me up, here's the email us, right? All I'm asking is you give us some kind of credible signal that you are going to start working towards being able to implement something on the taxation of the very rich. I'm not saying I want a wealth tax now. I'm not saying I want a wealth tax tomorrow. I know this is not something that we can immediately implement. So start working with us now on getting us ready to design and implement a tax in the right way. All right, so here is the strategy part. What are we going to do? Because I think things are getting pretty serious and it's time that we started to be a little bit more serious ourselves. We stop playing such nicey and we start to try to get ourselves a little bit more leverage, because I always thought if we aggressively made it the best strategy for Labour to speak to us, eventually they would realise it was their best strategy and they would speak to us. But unfortunately, it seems like that is maybe not going to work. So we need to be a bit more aggressive. We need to take action. So here is what we are going to do. Here is what you are going to do. Here is a link at the top of the video in the corner, down in the description. This is the link to sign up to vote in the local elections. There is going to be local elections across most of the UK on the 7th of May next month, okay? Sign up to vote. Sign up to vote. We need you to sign up to vote because I am going to turn around to Labour and say, listen, I am activating my viewership. I am getting my viewership ready to vote. Give us an offer, right? This video is going to come out on the 12th of April, right? So we have 3.5 weeks between this video coming out and the elections. Sign up to vote. Sign up to vote. And I know we get a lot of viewers now who are not in the UK, right? If you're not in the UK, search how to sign up in your country. Sign up. Sign up to vote. Sign up to vote. Get ready. Get ready, all right? And we are going to turn, and if you're not going to be here, if you're not able to vote physically on the 7th, sign up for a postal vote. Get ready for a postal vote. Sign up for a proxy vote. Get ready, right? Labour, I don't know if they maybe don't recognise that the power of social media in politics. But, I mean, Zach Plansky obviously recognises it. Then maybe the Labour Party just don't recognise it. We need to force these guys to recognise that we have power. Get it in your calendar. 7th of May, you're going to vote. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, right? We've got 3 weeks before the next, we've got 3 weeks and 3 videos before the next election. And on the 3rd of May, I am going to do a video telling you which vote is best for getting us wealth taxes, right? And Labour, and they probably keep ignoring me like they always fucking ignore me. You've got 3.5 weeks to persuade me that you will at some point do something on inequality. And I'm here, right? Here's the email again. People in Labour, email us, give us a pitch. Give us a pitch why I should not tell every single person watching this video to vote Green in that election. Please, give us something, right? Because I never wanted to be a supporter of the Green Party, right? I'm not a political person, right? My plan was and remains to work with you guys for you to not win the next election. But it appears that you are absolutely refusing to give us anything, right? So come, give us something, work with us, talk to us, convince us that at some point you will do something on inequality and taxation of the very rich. All right, so that's it. We sit back and we wait 3.5 weeks to see if Labour give us an offer. And listen, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be. We are not going to support any political party. We are not going to tie our flags to any political party. But we are going to demand offers. And we are going to vote, and you are going to vote in every election. Every local election. I don't care where you are. If you could be watching from Italy, from Spain, from America, from Australia, you're going to vote. And every single election, you are going to vote for who gives you the best offer on wealth taxes. Listen, this is not football, okay? This is the future livelihood of your kids here, okay? You are going to vote to protect your interests. You're going to vote in every election, right? It's as simple as that. Right, look, we are really on the verge of doing something here. And I know that maybe Labour can't see it. But I guarantee you one of two things is going to happen. Either Labour will recognise it, Either these political centrists in your country, if you're watching from abroad, will recognise it, or they will disappear. It's as simple as that. They will recognise it or they will disappear. And I can see, and it's obviously true, that we have a resurgent far right around the world, and I don't think that's going to stop. They will start winning elections. They already have started to win elections. But as we can see by looking at the US and by looking at Trump, when the far right comes into power, they will cut taxes on the rich, they will not act in the interests of the public, and they will preside over falling living standards, which means that they too will struggle to hold on to popularity and will struggle to hold on to power. There is an enormous political vacuum here, and we are well positioned to fill that, right? There is a real opportunity to build something here, a real opportunity to build something here. And I would encourage you to get involved in that based on a very simple method, right? This is how we win this, right? One very simple thing. I want to reach a situation where if I go out there on the street and I pull any man or woman off the street, that there is a 60, 70, 80% chance that when I say to them, why do you think your living standards are falling? Why do you think your kids are going to be poorer than you? They say, we think that's because of growing inequality. That's it. That's all we have to achieve. If we achieve that, then we will keep seeing, like we have seen in this country, that if anyone comes in and starts a political party that is serious about inequality, which, you know, according to the messaging of Zach Polanski is what the Green parties are, they will be immediately getting 20% of the vote. You know, that is the opportunity. Listen, when I saw that vote, when I saw the Greens win that vote in Gorton and Denton, I'm going to be honest, I was proud. Because a big part of that is us. That's us here, that's you on this channel, that's us educating the public that the reason you're getting poor is inequality. And if we do that, then we will reach a situation where politicians cannot win elections without at least promising to do something on inequality. And that will put us in a much stronger situation than we are in now. But we need to be getting involved, right? So here's what you're going to do. I know I've pushed the idea, you're going to sign up to vote. We're going to vote in every election, but also we're going to educate. We're going to educate. You're going to educate yourselves. You're going to use these videos. You're going to send them to your friends and your family. You're going to educate the people around you on this very simple message. The reason you are getting poorer, the reason your kids are getting poorer is because of growing inequality. If we do not take action on growing wealth inequality, then this will get worse and worse and worse. But there is a political movement, an educational movement, which is doing something about it. So get involved, create. And this is what we need. We need more people making videos. Look at what we've achieved here already, right? There is a massive gap, right? It was obvious 5 years ago that political power was moving from Murdoch, from the traditional media, from TV and radio and newspapers towards social media. And nobody moved, all right? The Labour Party didn't move, the Conservative Party didn't move, the Republicans, the Democrats, the online Sky News didn't move. We moved into that space, right? There's so much space to be won here on social media. I did a call out in, I think it was May last year, saying I want to see more creators. I want to see more creators. Since that, we've got Louisa Munch. She's got more than 250,000 on Instagram. We've got Barry's Economics. Barry's Economics hit 100,000 subs on YouTube last week. Round of applause for Barry's Economics. Listen, if you go out there and you make good videos saying, educating this message to your community, to people like you, I'm going to back it. I'm going to boost it. It took me 4 years to get 100,000 subs on YouTube. But Barry's got it in like 6-9 months. When I go around the world, I want to see influencers in every country. You know, where's the Italian guy doing videos like this? You know, shout out to Punters Politics in Australia. I went there last year. He's doing it. Listen, there's demand for this. There is demand for this. You start making videos on YouTube, you can make money doing this. Listen, make videos. Educate your families. Educate your communities. Whatever it is, listen, use our clips, put them out there, make music, make t-shirts, make posters, make stickers. Join your political parties. Yeah, I don't care. Listen, join the Green Party, join the Labour Party, join Reform. I don't care. Whatever party you join, tell them, why are you not doing more on wealth taxes? Force your political parties to do more on wealth taxes. Get jobs that matter. Get jobs in media, academics. We need more economists. Get jobs in politics. Listen, this is going to be a big movement. There is such a gap here. There is such a gap here, and we can step in to fill it. All right, so that's it. Everything you do, simple, clear messaging. Simple, clear messaging. Repetition. Say it again and again. The reason you're getting poorer is growing inequality. If we don't do anything about growing inequality, your kids will get poorer. And you educate yourself on that. You educate your communities on that. And you create whatever you can create to share that message, right? Art, whatever you can do. Posters, stickers, videos, music. You make it. But whatever you do, you have to speak with compassion. You cannot exclude people. You have to bring people in, win people over. In the end of the day, you guys have a shared financial interest in this. If you do not do anything, you're going to get poorer and poorer and poorer, and that's going to affect your family, that's going to affect your kids. So that's it. We're going to run at this now. We're all going to do this together, all right? You're not going to burn yourself out, all right? When you need to take rests, you take rests. There needs to be lots of us. I want to see lots of us on social media, lots of us in the political parties, lots of us in economics, lots of us in media. When some of us are resting, others of us are pushing. That's how it's going to work. We carry what we can, we contribute what we can, we take what we need, and we give what we can. We keep going. But listen, the opportunity is there, man. The opportunity is there. Like I showed you those numbers at the beginning of the video. The shattering of 250 years of British politics. And what that means is there's a gap. There's a gap to fill. And there's nobody there. There's nobody there filling it on social media. The political parties might ignore us, but if they keep ignoring us, they're going to die. So listen, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep showing up for as long as I can with the videos every week. You guys are going to get involved. You're going to sign up to vote. You Labour politicians are going to call out and you're going to give me an offer. Yeah, look, I know people are going to think that I'm being like too aggressive on Labour here, and people are going to say that. And you know, sometimes when I talk to people in Labour, that's what they say. They say, "Oh, but you're not being nice to us. You're not being nice to us." Listen, I'll be the nicest guy in the world to you. Give me an offer. Give me an offer. Put me in a situation where when I look at Labour, I believe that at some point, somewhere in the future, they are going to start working seriously on reducing inequality. Please, give me some kind of offer. Help me to help you. Help me to help you. And for the rest of us, we are going to make it painfully, painfully obvious to every single person in this country, in your country. The only way to protect your children is to do something on the future of inequality. Make it obvious. Obvious, obvious, obvious. All right, that's it. That's your job. That's my job. I'll keep doing it. Thank you very much. Tax Wealth, not work.